unfolding was very unfortunate. The first thing we did, my wife and I, we provided a little money to a relief organization, and I wrote about 100 letters to various people that we knew in Japan, asking how they were doing and what we could do for them. And I think, understandably, we got back very little. That is, the Japanese people, they're prideful, and I think they feel that they can do the most of it themselves. They really don't need us amateurs in their world.
I think I was in New York. I think I heard about it in the morning on the news, and I immediately thought of the Mediatheque in Sendai. And then 2 seconds later, I said, oh my God, why am I thinking about a building? I should be mostly concerned about the people. And I remember going into the office and immediately sending a lot of emails to people that I knew in Japan. I was very concerned about Hitoshi Abe, who has his practice in Sendai and is also the department chair of architecture at UCLA. So I wasn't sure whether he was in LA or whether he was in Japan. So I sent him a note, luckily got a note back from him, and he was actually able to contact his office in Sendai, and the building that they were in was pretty heavily damaged, but none of the people were hurt. So he was very thankful about that, but he hadn't been able to get in contact with his parents. So I was concerned about them because he hadn't heard. Luckily, I guess 24 hours later, he heard from his parents and they were okay. But it's funny because our first reaction, being in the architectural profession, is to think about the buildings and to worry about them. And then you catch yourself and you realize we should be mostly concerned about the people. I think what this exposes is both a huge opportunity to rethink building codes, seismic codes, how you rebuild this part of Japan, the difficult decisions that will be involved in that. Do you move entire towns that are built on the coast? Do you figure out other ways of rebuilding in the same place? And I think looking at the big picture, 20 years from now, I think people are going to look back and they're going to say, either this was a point in time where Japan rethought things and took the opportunity to point itself in a new direction, or it's possible that this could become a moment where it reinforces other trends that have been happening in Japan over the last 20 years. You know, a slower economy, an aging population. And I think it poses this huge chance for Japan to re-energize itself, to rethink itself. And I think that's where we are right now.
Thanks. So I was in Europe in Nice, actually. And so being in Europe, I do remember how I sort of learned from it, because I woke up in the morning and switched on the television. And so people in Europe watched the unfolding of first the earthquake, then the tsunami, all on television. And I think this was one of the most probably the most well-documented natural disasters in history, besides being one of the largest. And so to watch something of this magnitude unfold over the course of about 2-3 hours, certainly the earthquake and the tsunami, and how well it was the response, where you could see on live television the warnings as being halfway around the world, was very moving and sort of raised all sorts of obviously all sorts of questions. In terms of my initial response, I immediately realized we had a few staff members in Japan, and so obviously I had to figure out where they were, and the telephone systems were down, but I did get a response on the emails on the BlackBerry, And that took me back to sort of a similar event in 9/11, where the telephone systems were down in New York, as you recall, and the Blackberries were still functioning. And so, you know, natural disasters happen, and will continue to happen, and the way the technology unfolds with it raises the sort of social dimensions that are interesting, besides the sort of terrible personal human tragedy that happens.
And at the event, I was in the construction site of the building that I showed you as a recent building that I'm involved in. And the seismic scale was 5+, which is biggest earthquake which I have ever experienced in my life. But still, I could find out, okay, there is no primary vertical vibration, and I could tell that, okay, this is a slow frequency vibration, so the epicenter should be far away from there where I was. So somehow I could feel in peace. But still, I started worrying about the epicenter must be damaged heavily. So I started worrying about that. And at that day, I could not get back to my house because all the transportation system down. And during waiting, the transportation system restart. With our colleague, we have talked about the size of the earthquake, and we were talked about the loss of the economical loss of this disaster could be like $1 billion US, but that can't be that small. But because for Japanese, for me, it is very, very difficult to believe the size of the disaster was that big. So that's why I explained to you that people tend to believe that they want only what they want to, and that is my personal experience. And another thing that I learned from this event was, as you might know, in the rural area of the Tohoku area, the communities of all the people and the residents worked very well to recover the damage. And sometimes the community system is too heavy for the residents in urban area like me. But that worked very well. That works very well in the damaged area. And I have learned, okay, this society is established based on this type of disaster historically. That's what I just feel from the event.
いいですかね。私はその時は法政大学の私の研究室におりました。
I was at the university, Hosei University, where I teach in Tokyo.
今市ヶ谷っていう東京のちょうど中央に位置する場所にあります。
It is located in the center of Tokyo, Ichigaya.
おそらく、あの地震の強さは震度5弱だったと思いますが、すごい揺れでした。
Magnitude, I'm sorry.
Seismic intensity.
Seismic intensity, I'm sorry, was 5, but it was much bigger. It felt much bigger than the actual size.
Yeah. 非常に大きな、今まで経験したことないぐらいの大きな揺れが長く5分ぐらい続いておりました。
There was a big movement that I've never experienced that endured about 5 minutes.
非常にゆっくりした揺れでしたので、近い地震ではないと思いまして、きっと遠いところでものすごく大きな エネルギーをマグニチュードを持った地震が起きているということを直感で感じました。
From my intuition, because it was moving very slowly, I thought that the epicenter must be somewhere far away, and that is making a big energy magnitude.
しばらく2時間ぐらいしてからでしょうか、テレビを見る機会があって、それを見てたら震源地が仙台の近くだということを初めて知りました。
About 2 hours later, when I was able to watch TV, I realized that the epicenter was very close to Sendai.
もちろん、
and I was very surprised.
仙台メデテイクのことが瞬時に頭をよぎりました。
Immediately, of course, I thought about Sendai Mediatheque.
ストラクチャルシステムに対しては非常に自信を持って設計していたんですが、ガラスだとかなんかそういう二次的なものが大きな被害を受けているんではないかなというそういうことを感じました。
I was confident about the main structural system, but I was worried about the secondary systems such as the glass.
幸いにしてガラスの方は、後で分かったんですが、それほどじゃなくて、天井が落下したり、ガラスも部分的にちょっと壊れたようですけども、そういう、二次部材と言われている内装材ですね、外装材、その一部が壊れたということになったのを後で知って、それはもう本当にほっとしました。
It was a big relief to know that the glass was fine, although the ceiling fell a little bit. But that made me much relieved to know that it was fine.
研究室から自宅までおよそ3時間かけて歩いて帰りました。
From the office and the university, I walked about 3 hours to get to my house.
おそらく非常に近いところなんだけども大変でした。
The location itself was very close, but it took a very long time, and I got very tired.
その翌日に伊藤事務所を通して仙台メディアテックの被害が構造何もなくて、先ほど言ったような一部その二次部材の被害があった程度だということを実は確認しました。
The next day, I actually heard from Toyo Ido's office that the basic structural system of Sendai Mediatheque was fine.
ですからその日は当日は心配で眠れませんでした。
Therefore, that night the earthquake happened, I couldn't sleep because I was too worried about Sendai Mediatheque.
ちょうど今ジェットラグで眠れないのと同じでした。
It's same as my recent the condition now that I can't sleep with the jet lag.
あとはいろいろ実際の客観的にその物事を分析していくのが僕のプロフェッションですので、どうしてそのシーリングが落ちたか、あるいは実際に仙台にどのような構造的なことが地震によって挙動があったのか、それを調べたりしておりました。
My role is to observe the structural system, what actually happened and what was the effect of the earthquake. So after I found out about the situation, I started observing about the actual situation.
今日先ほどスライドでお話しした通りです。
Which is what I talked about with the slides tonight.
So I think it brings up a lot of, you guys bring up a lot of points. One being this kind of emergent change, like emergency of change, the shift. And I also experienced being in Tokyo where the moment it happened, the trains all stopped in Tokyo. And obviously Professor Sasaki was stuck, but he could walk home because it was 3 hours. I think it's slightly different comparing New York blackout that happened in 03, sorry, where we saw people walking home across the bridge to New Jersey and whatnot, but people in Tokyo take bullet trains that are 2 hours away, so there's a massive amount of people stuck in the city. And just to give you an example, Shinjuku Station is one of the biggest, which in 2007 they recorded 3.7 million people go through that transit in one day.